Hi, welcome to another lunchtime session from PMO Learning. It's a series we've been doing throughout the year, Lunch and Learns, lots of different topics. If you're not familiar, they are all available on the website under the event that you probably saw to come and join on this one. That all the recordings that you've done for certain subjects and stuff are all there. So please do go and check them out. There's bound to be some other subject matters that you'd be interested in. So hopefully you're all interested in PMOs. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place because that's what we're all about as PMO Learning. We're here today to talk specifically about PMO development plans. The reason why we picked up on this subject, we're actually doing a series of things that are all about people that are obviously working within PMO, but some of the more, I suppose, the career side of stuff where learning kind of dovetails in. If you've not already caught it before, we've just done an ebook which is available to download on training needs analysis, and Able Assistant Jen will be putting the link in the chat if you want to go and have a look at that. So again, it's just about being able to do things that that are related to our careers and not necessarily just taking the lead from our organizations all the time. So training needs analysis was first. And then naturally this follows on PMO development plans, because obviously when you identify things like your training, you would have already been through some kind of skills assessment to work out, well, where do you want to put your development? And the development plan is kind of like the next thing along from that in terms of having a formal process around it and so on. So I'm keeping an eye on chat because one of the things that I really love is if we are missing anything, this is kind of like a pre-webinar for us finalizing our next ebook. And I just want to make sure that we're capturing exactly what you think should be in there in terms of development plans. But hopefully we would have got the vast majority of it. So just over the next hour, 50 minutes, something like that, we're going to take you through some different aspects of development plans, but also share our particular template that we have, and also examples as well, just to give you an idea about everything that we've talked about, and just put that into a finalized development plan so you can see that. And yes, the session is being recorded, and if you want access to the decks and obviously the template that we'll pull together, we'll be able to get that across to you post webinar, perhaps when we've had to tickle it a little bit because we might have missed something. So that's what we're going to do. So hopefully that all sounds okay. So let's start off then. So PMO development plan, I'd love to know straight away into chat, if you don't mind, have you already got one? Do you already use it? Does your organization already advocate for them? What's your situation around the whole PMO development plan? I'd love to know. If you don't know what they are, it is essentially a structured plan to help guide yourself, with your career, both within the organization, but also I want to stress that, there's no reason why people can't have development plans that are not actually related necessarily to your organization. It's something that is a lifelong professional tool, as it were. But today's session is very much thinking about it in terms of your role that you're doing within the organization in which you're performing. So good. So straight away, we've got people that are not, it's aspiration to do it moving forward, but some are, again, not specifically to PMO, but organization has personal development plans. Absolutely. We're using development plans that are focused on the business's OKRs, which is really interesting because it has to filter down ultimately to the people that are going to be delivering and doing the roles, in which obviously rolls back up to an organization and strategy, and whether it's actually going to be meeting those through the role that you're actually doing. So yes, another one is it's struggle to get on top of this kind of stuff because we're all busy. We say this all the time because there's going to be some bits in here that you're going to be saying, who's got time for that? The bottom line is that as a true professional, you have to make time for this kind of stuff, certainly within the whole PMO space, because it is changing so much. as we look at, well, just what's happened over the last decade in terms of where PMOs have gone, where our organizations have gone in terms of the way that they're delivering projects, the whole lot is changing and will continue to change. And we need to make sure that we are keeping up with that pace of change. So from an individual point of view, why have them? Well, actually, it does help to bring some clarity and focus to what it is that you should be developing in. So if you look at that wide spectrum of PMO role, it's huge. There's so many things that can be done within the PMO remit, both within your role today and perhaps what will be happening 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line. There is a lot. There's obviously the gaps that you want to try and fill in terms of the work that you're doing and what's required of you. The opposite side to that is actually getting stronger in some of your strengths as well, which is equally as crucial. We just talked about the whole staying relevant in terms of what's happening both within your organization, but also the PMO as a wider profession and what's happening, in different types of PMOs. Because remember, we're not all necessarily going to be working for the same organization all our lives. So again, it's about being able to stay relevant, not only in the role that you're in, but also thinking, more broadly about what's happening in that whole PMO space. Yes, we've got that organizational goals and aligning to that, and we do talk a little bit about that. But I want this session to be more about, what you can be doing and what you need to be thinking about. That we do obviously talk about that link, because otherwise, why would organizations have development plans as a tool for their employees? Obviously, things around career progression, whether that's staying within the same role and getting better at it or moving out, and of course being better at what it is that we do. And who could argue with that we all need a bit of that. But from organizations' point of view, it's very black and white in terms of why these things are even, a part of the whole system within our organizations, is that ultimately they want our employees to be doing bigger and better and, being more successful in what it is they're doing, performing better, and ultimately doing the role, not just in terms of what the level of competence, but exceeding that. There's obviously that whole kind of talent management piece, which you'll be familiar with in your own organizations, and that whole succession planning part. And also, obviously, encouraging people to carry on learning. There has been some sessions that we've done before where we talked about, you might be familiar with that whole kind of growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and about some of the work that Microsoft, for example, have done over the last couple of years. We're really encouraging their employees to think about what growth mindset really means and how that manifests itself in individuals working within organizations. It's a really interesting piece. And if you're interested, you can just go and have a search for that in terms of Microsoft and growth mindset. But that's what we're looking for, is that we don't want people working within the PMO space to be really fixed, a fixed mindset that it all, that there isn't other ways to do stuff. Of course, there are different ways to do some of the things that we are doing. That's what we're all about, being able to adapt. It's just the nature of the role that we're in and where we sit within organizations that we have to be like that. But from an organization's point of view, having these kind of tools in place help them to be able to achieve what they need to do in terms of their talent. What's really interesting when you just look at the whole piece around, and I think for many people perhaps don't step back, and depending on your age, you'll be familiar with some of these things coming online, but it's, what's the whole point of a whole development plan? And I've always liked them because of my started working in my career at university was with Hewlett-Packard, and one of the big things that HP used to be really up on was the management by objectives, which actually goes back quite a way. You probably heard the name Peter Drucker as well. These are all these kind of like management type tools that have all been brought in along the way to try and help employees do better at their work, and you as an individual do better at what it is that you're doing. So the management by objectives is actually one of the underlying kind of things within HP, and what they were really up on and hot on was the link between the performance review and then the development plan being a focus of being that connected. If you go look at all the different things that have come online, these are all things today that for some of those we still use and that they're still prominent. And we will talk about competency frameworks that came onto the scene into the 80s. Many of you will be familiar with the whole kind of balanced scorecards, which was a 90s type thing. Moving on into the 2000s, it is about being able to utilize and some of the technology and enabled development that people can do. And I think that's been a big change over the last 20 years about how do we develop. And then today, I think when we look at where the roles and careers are going, things are not as straight in a linear line. And that means thinking differently about our careers, full stop, but also the advance of things like social learning. So actually a lot of the things that we can do to learn are not in training courses, even though that's what we do. But there are other things that you can be doing that wrap around that. And we will talk about that, because development plans are ultimately about having a balanced way of trying to learn. There'll always be spaces for training courses, run by trainers, but there are other ways in which people can actually develop as well. So that's just a little bit of a background, because it's, the whole development plan things have been around for quite a long time. So, right back into the 50s and 60s. In terms of our development plans, just thinking about why they're important, I just wanted to just talk briefly about in terms of PMO careers today, in terms of the trends, the challenges and the opportunities that we have. And why development plans play a part in having that kind of structured approach to things rather than just letting things happen to us. So in terms of some of the trends, over the years, you've found that more and more people working with the whole PMO space are not just working at a project level or a program level, there's also that kind of portfolio level, sometimes working at across all of it, sometimes just within one or two of them. The whole landscape has changed in terms of, again, just looking back at our timelines, what happened just over the last 20 years in terms of where PMOs have come from. Used to be called PSO more than PMO, so that gives you a little of an insight. It was Project Support Office, whereas the P in PMO stands for projects, programs, or portfolios. So back then, all around a project, but think how much our landscape has changed now in terms of not just understanding project management, but program management and portfolio management as well. So there's quite a lot more in terms of where people can be working. There's been a big shift, I would say, over the last decade, 7 to 10 years, something like that, where making more sense about how PMOs work within organizations and having a service-based approach rather than just providing support as and when and where it might be needed. So if you're not familiar with a service-based PMOs, again, we've done sessions before, like on service-based PMOs. You can go and have a look at that in the back catalogue. But very briefly, it is about PMOs being able to offer the services based on what the organisation wants and it needs. So therefore, you're prepared in terms of the kind of people you have within the PMO and that they're skilled and competent enough in the areas of which you are servicing that organisation. So it's a big shift in terms of the way that PMOs get set up and the way that they run, the way that they manage, and equally how people that are working with PMOs are running, doing their roles. So it's been a big change in terms of just, what it is that the PMO is there to do. And then as we have got more and more change happening within organizations, there has been more and more requirement to have different PMOs within the organization, which not only gives us different types of projects, programs, and portfolios to be working with on, but it also means that there are more things to do around potentially at that management level where you're overseeing multiple PMOs that are doing different types of servicing for different types of parts of the business. So it's been a real breadth and depth is changing in terms of the whole PMO space. We can't ignore the trends that are happening right now. Difficult trends, ones that are really, really hard to overcome at the moment for a lot of organizations, coming through that kind of digital transformation that a lot of organizations are going through anyway, but from a PMO point of view, about the rise of data analytics, predictive analytics, and the whole AI technologies, which we know will be coming into the role. But for right now, where we are standing at the end of 2024, it's still a mixed up world. There's still no clear answers or a clear path as to how to make this stuff happen. So we're on the cusp of things, but we're not quite sure what's going on, which can always feel really difficult. And then we've always got these common hotspot areas. I mean, you're probably sitting there right now, and if you're not one of these, what are some of the hotspot areas have I not got here? But we hear in all the time right now, it's the business case stuff, it's the benefits management, it's risk management, and it's resource management are the ones that people tend to focus more on in terms of we've not got these sorted within our organizations. There's other PMO ones like reporting that I've not got on there because, this is just, again, just thinking about some of the core kind of service support type areas that we're working within and some of those subjects that really cause us problems. So from the trends side is then the challenge side, which is, of course, all of those trends can cause us some challenges. But I think we're within the whole PMO space. And again, where we're standing right now at the end of 2024, tricky, economic times, certainly here in the UK, change of government, again, US change of government. There's a lot of things that impact the way our organizations choose to do change. And with that is the impact on right down at that PMO level in terms of how we're doing things, which is that continuous, we want to do more, but we're just getting, is less. There's still this challenge about the perceived value of the PMO and what it's doing for the organization, and do we add value, all of that kind of stuff. With that lack of sponsorship and championing within organizations about, we need people to sponsor the whole idea of having the PMO and then the continuous sponsorship of it as it starts to grow and change and do more within the business. It's a big problem for a lot of organizations still. Technology changes we've touched upon, delivery approaches have changed, as we know. There's the whole advent of it's not just waterfall anymore, that's on the shelves to pick from. We've got the whole kind of agile mindset, which is bringing things like the Scrum. There's the combinations of the two. We're now seeing things like product management and DevOps coming into that kind of change space. There's a lot more than there was just 20 years ago. And of course, the challenge in all of this is that upskilling and having that time, the money, the mindset, all of that kind of thing feeds into it. But in terms of the opportunity is actually being for us is focusing on things that really make the difference. So being able to understand what the difference is, what would make the difference is tricky sometimes. But actually for us as a opportunity around PMO is focusing on things that make the difference. It's also thinking about how you build PMO for the future, even though we never get to an end state. It's like anything, it's like life. You always think you're going to have your life sorted and that you've got your plans and everything else, but you never quite get there. The same with the PMO, but we should be always thinking about how we build it for a future, and whether that's a 6-month future, a 5-year, whatever it might be. But these are the kind of opportunities that we have, is just that we know that things will not stay the same. It will be changing. It's about having the right people in the right roles. And is that you? Are you the right person in the right role today, next week, 5 years, whatever it might be? So those are, again, the opportunities. We've got innovative changes that are going to make our lives easier, our organizations' lives easier, and projects are be more successful because of it. What are these innovative changes? Well, we know some of them, don't quite deeply understand how they're going to work, but look where that came from. So what will be the next thing down the line, the next super thing that's going to be changing the way that organizations run and change? And then we can't get away from this whole thing right now, which is the data-driven PMO is the biggest thing that's kind of there on the horizon, closer for some than others. And you also want to be where you wanted and valued, because that is a real opportunity for you in terms of your career, is that you will get more out of your PMO career, if that's what you really love doing, if you're in the right place where you're wanted and you're valued. It's going to be a lot better than trying to continuously hit your head against a brick wall, perhaps in those organizations where there's continuous lack of sponsorship, support, all of that kind of stuff. But we have to bring that into the mix, that sometimes our development plans can be about trying to find, I want to develop myself, but sometimes you can develop yourself out of your organization. And I've been having a conversation with somebody just a couple of weeks ago that is exactly in that position, ready for an organization that's now ready for the kind of skills that they've been building up. So it's an interesting one. Also, from just thinking about, you know, the key skills for PMO people, because this is going to feed into the bits when we talk about the development plan. So this is the underlying parts. When you're going to do a structured approach to our development, actually a lot of it is about the thinking and the thought process. It's about the reflection. It's about the you know, almost doing a stock take of who you are, what you've got, what you've already you know, what your strengths already are. Do you already appreciate where some gaps might be? All of that kind of stuff is the kind of underlying things that think about before you're putting pen to paper. So from that perspective, it's just from a key skills point of view for anybody working in PMO today, regardless of what level you're at, these are, I think, pretty much encapsulates, unless please do drop into chat if I'm missing something. So there's key skills around the delivery support type things that we're doing across projects, programs, and portfolios. And those are some of the examples to give that some context. There's the actual change environment in which we're working. So that's the kind of governance frameworks, assurance, the methods, the tools that we put in place in terms of our allowing our organization to deliver projects, programs, portfolios better, smoother, quicker, all of that kind of good stuff. We've got the hard and the soft skills. So the hard skills, obviously, about things like being able to utilize and use some of the tools, you know, and obviously the softer skills being about being able to interact with us, collaborate, all of that kind of good stuff. There's the underpinning knowledge that's required in order to be able to do the jobs. That's about your corporate strategy. Do you understand it? What are your corporate processes in which you're dovetailing into? Do you understand some of the financial aspects of project management that's, you know, and how it links to the corporate finance? There's a lot of underlying knowledge that wraps around what you're doing around PMO. So it's sometimes when we think about development, it's not necessarily just about going on the latest project management course or PMO course or whatever. It's actually, there's other aspects for us to think about. And then finally, some of the ones that are just very much about the behavior that wraps around all of this. So this is the how you conduct yourself, is how people perceive you, it's how you get things done and how you deal with people, the behaviors that people can see from you. Again, these are just things that you may be thinking about when it comes to development. So just briefly, we have covered this off before in other sessions, but I just think it's just crucial just for, again, just thinking about for development plans, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that you're moving on a ladder and onwards and upwards. That's not what PMO is all about. Yes, there is that ability, and I'm going to show you that in a second, but also that, you know, what is deeply important for people working with the PMO space is that actually you can be working as an analyst and you can be the best analyst around, say, areas like benefits management or finance or planning. And actually, you don't want to be moving onwards and upwards. You're perfectly fine and happy with that deep knowledge that you've got. And we see that a lot within kind of whole career pathways around PMO space. But just to give you some ideas about this session that we've done before, which is about career pathways around PMOs, about why people do want to move on between one role to another. So we start with the kind of junior level role, entry level role into PMO, and about why they might want to move on from that into the next role. And it's like anything, it's about being able to want, you know, wanting more responsibility, wanting to try out different types of things within the role that's currently not available to you, and actually get more involved in some of the more bigger, more complex stuff. So in order to be able to make those moves, you've got to think about how we might develop to be able to do that and have a plan in order to get there. If you look at the analyst role, just touched on one there about becoming more specialized in a certain area, you know, for example, whether it be benefits, resource management, whatever it might be. Working in a different type of PMO, you might find that actually, you know, you're wanting to broaden out in terms of the context of PMOs that you're working within. And of course, the classic one is that you may want to start to think about, I want to do some more management type, leadership type stuff, whether that be actually running a PMO team yourself, or standing up to the kind of PMO lead type role. So what I mean there is that the difference between actually taking on line management responsibilities for a PMO team versus the kind of operational management of a PMO team in terms of maybe leading a program type office. Yeah, so there's those kind of things that make people want to think about moving on. So from a manager point of view, you may want to think about moving more higher up in terms of where the PMO might be sitting within the organization, whether that be up to kind of like a portfolio level, if you've been more at the program level, or an enterprise level type PMO. Managing a bigger PMO or a number of PMOs, kind of integrated PMO model across an organization, or indeed that you may want to specialize in actually setting them up. And you see that a lot within the marketplace, that people that have really enjoyed that aspect of setting up PMO rather than the ongoing running of them. And that's where you see a lot of small consultancies, independent consultants, contractors that decide to go that route because of the interest and the excitement sometimes about setting up the whole PMO and then moving off. But for a lot of people, this role didn't exist really, until I will, again, let's say like 7-10 years ago. You see it more and more often now, which is a PMO director, which may, in some organizations, is at board level or just one below it. Where it's a PMO director role, where you're taking on a more strategic approach to the work that you're doing. You may be setting up that kind of integrated PMO model or enterprise PMOs across the organization, or even actually wanting to put yourself out there as a thought leader in the space. And for some, again, that might mean actually becoming more of an independent resource, where you're working operating at a high level independently, or actually just going to organizations that have got a real complex need across a large organization with a large budget. And sometimes that means about getting out and about and sharing your thoughts as a leader in this area. So development plans. Conscious of some stuff that we've talked about there, it's like, is she going to get onto development plans? I want to make it clear that actually there's a lot of thinking that goes into it before you actually probably put pen to paper. But for development plans, there are 4 core components of them, and goals, skills, actions, and obviously being able to track where you are against the original goal that you've stated. So very top level, those are what make up the 4 components of a development plan. So what I want to do is just is go through those in a little bit more detail. So for goals, obviously, is about being able to define goals. And when you're working within an organization and doing a development plan, it has to be combined with a personal kind of ambitions, but also linked to what your organization's needs are. Otherwise you're not going to get that kind of backing and support to be able to do that particular development. Certainly if your organization is the one that kind of funds that and gives you the kind of time to be able to do that kind of stuff. So for example, with looking at from an organization point of view, pretty obvious, but it's, do you actually understand what your organization's focus actually is? Was at a session the other day. Well, actually, for a lot of people working in an organization, it's not really clear what the strategy might even be for your organization. So it's certainly something that you can do straight away if you're not quite clear about, well, what is your company's strategy, where is it going, what is its focus, in order to be able to then think about your piece in terms of the PMO and your role within that PMO. But there's just a classic example. If it's going down that route, for example, digital transformation, does that mean that there's got to be a little bit more focus on the kind of agile delivery approaches, maybe, or technology tools, or whatever it might be? From, again, not just thinking about yourself in this, but also the PMO, because of your working, you within a PMO supporting a organization, you also have to kind of reflect on organization's goals, strategies, whatever it might be, and how that impacts PMO, and therefore how does that impact the roles within the PMO. So you can see how you can just, you can see how it cascades and waterfalls. You've got to reflect on those kind of personal ambitions. This again is just thinking about doing that thinking, which is why all that stuff I've just talked about for the first 20 minutes are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. And is it about the next role or level you'd like to reach within the PMO? Do you want to see yourself advancing within the PMO, within the particular role that you're in at the moment and going deeper? Or do you want to kind of move on more in terms of kind of business leadership type stuff? Because what's interesting when you have been working within the PMO space for a long time is that you'll start to see within the organizations that there are different roles that you can be going into that kind of leave the whole PMO and the project management space behind. So again, it's just this reflection on the personal ambitions about, well, where do you want to go both in the short and the long term? And this is the kind of work that we don't do. We absolutely don't do it. But just to exactly, I think it was the point by Dave that you get into the day to day and don't think about just sticking your head up for a bit, having a bit of reflection, and just thinking, actually, what am I doing? Like, where do I really want to go in this whole thing? And again, of course, it's thinking about how you're bridging the two. So you're looking for the areas where obviously ambition, what you're trying to do, and the organizations need intersect. Not rocket science, that's pretty obvious. But again, if you're thinking about, what are some of the common challenges that you hear, or stakeholders that you're working with, or execs that you're listening to, or what's the general feel about what they feel about the PMO and the services that it offers, will give you further ideas about where perhaps you might want to be thinking about your focus, both as an individual, but also if you're listening to this as a manager of a PMO team, is how do you think about then getting a good development plan across everyone in the team that's going to be able to play to their strengths and be able to pinpoint some of the areas that are going to be needed both now and in the near future. One of the two things that you need to consider here is the prioritization of the goals. Some things are going to be more important than others. So again, just really simply just thinking about those in terms of how critical they are, desirable, or is it quite, a personal thing as well? Just a mix of things, but also prioritization is going to be crucial because you can only do so much with so much time that you have available. So, again, prioritization comes into this, but also you hopefully might have heard of SMART in terms of how you might set goals and think about goals. It's a common tool that's used across organizations, across many different areas of a business, because actually it's just a way to think about a goal being a lot more rounded rather than something that feels quite airy-fairy. But a goal, if it has some of these aspects to it, specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, it's time-bound, it starts to feel a little bit more real than just saying, yeah, I think I should think about doing that. Yeah. So there you go. So those are the two aspects around it that certainly need to be brought into it. When we look at the skills bit, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, so for some people, you may already be familiar with the PMO competency framework. It's one of the textbooks that are used on the essentials courses that we run here at PMO Learning. But it is a competency framework, which again, if you looked back at what was coming out in the 1980s, interestingly, it took us until 2021 to have one for PMOs. Project management, there's been one around for a fair few years, but it's only recently that there has been one available for PMO people. And it's competency assessments that allow you to really pinpoint strengths and gaps. And again, allows you to see really simply where you might want to focus your development. But it's not all just about you doing the assessment, looking at a tool like this and thinking, oh, I've got some gaps in that area, I must do something about it. Not as easy as that, because you've got to think about, well, actually within our PMO at the moment, we don't need to do any stuff around that because we don't do it. Look at that spider diagram, finance management for this particular PMO. It may not be a thing that you do. So it may not be the right kind of development to focus on because your organization doesn't have that need. But what it is doing is really fascinating to show where the strengths are and where you may need to continue getting stronger. Or certainly when you do these things as a team, you can see where the gaps might be across the teams versus the services that you're currently offering, plus what you want to offer in the future. So it's an interesting piece. For some people, it's really obvious where your skills gaps might be and where your strengths are, in which case that's great. But sometimes using something like this can give you something else that you may not be apparent, or already in your kind of like thought processes. But this is a bit about trying to choose, well, where's the development happening? Okay. Then there's the actual action. So obviously how you're going to meet the goals. So what resources and tools you might be using to be able to do that. And I want you to be thinking about, and hopefully you've heard about the 70-20-10. Again, we have done things on this because what we do here at PMO Learning is in the 10. Okay. So the 10, this is how learning and development, it's a model that's been around for many years. What it stands for is where you may choose to get your approach as to how you might do some development. Yeah, so for training courses, so that formal training, that would probably make up, it's 10% of what you might be doing in terms of your development. Okay. The 70%, so right on the other side, is what you can be doing on the job. So things that you're learning in the workplace by doing the job. Okay. And then the 20% in the middle is kind of like that bit that it said for what is the, the timeline around the social learning. Yeah. So that's the things like going to conferences, going to a seminar, reading a book, all of that kind of thing. Yeah. So 10% formal courses, 70% of what all your learning will come in your organization in some way, shape, or form. We'll look at that in a second. And then 20% of it is social. So when you think about your development, it's not just about, oh, I'm going to go on a training course. And there's other things, and I will demonstrate that. It's also good to think about what does work well for other people. So you're going to get some guidance from other PMO people, managers that you've got, learning and development department within your organization. The great thing about from other PMO people is that they will also have got some great ideas. So meeting chat, we've got PMO people right now. So what are the things that as we go through this, I want you to think about some of the things that you have done development wise that you think other people in our group here today would like to see. Something that you've actually, it went down really well, managed to fit it in around busy work, anything like that. We'd like your ideas and pop them into chat. What we've got here is a combination of the 70 2010. So we've got training courses are right up there. You might do some mentoring and coaching type stuff like within the job. You may be doing some online learning as part of the role that you're doing within your organization. If not, a lot of e-learning type stuff outside of that space. You could be development around the tools. There's a lot of different tools that we're using here within the PMO, the workshops, the conferences, stuff on the job like the stretch assignments. So doing things that are going to take you out of the comfort zone, things that are going to make you develop skill just by being able to give that stretch kind of assignment within the PMO or within your delivery organization. Peer learning, another great one within the organization, but also you can look at PMO people outside your organization as well. And thing of networking. You have self-directed learning, which is a lot of it about. I don't know if you've ever looked at things like some of the online courses that are like LinkedIn and things like that. There's a lot out there. Communities of practice, volunteering, getting involved in some of the professional bodies and things like that. The whole knowledge repositories that exist within your organization and more wider. For example, you may want to look at things like membership around things like House of PMO. They have a large repository and knowledge around different subject areas around PMO, for example. Lunch and Learns, you're listening to one right now. Shared projects within your organization, so working cross-department on things. Public speaking is a brilliant one. For anybody that's working within PMO space, but certainly if you're one of these people that would shy away from this. And there are a lot of things out there that you can do to help you develop your public speaking. There are groups and things, and one of the best websites you can go and have a look at for what's in your local area for things like that is Meetups. It's a website, Meetups, all one word. There's a lot of different things that will be happening in your local area that will help you in some of these different aspects of your kind of skill behavior type stuff. journaling, reading stuff, obviously a lot of stuff on social media. There's a lot of different things that you can be doing in terms of that development stuff. So just think, any development that you've done yourself that you think, yeah, it was really good for me, just drop it into chat. It'd be lovely if you could share something. So in terms of coming up to the last part of the pieces that are required is the tracking and the metrics, which keep you focused, but also know that actually you've been successful in your development. And these are the bits that the organizations generally want to know, that if they're investing in you, they want to see what the return will be. Yeah, so it's as clear as that. So one of the obvious ways that people do that is through KPIs when you're developing your development plan. For example, the KPIs would be, that you'll, if you're going to do a training course, that you would do that by a certain date. That's a very clear, metric. But it's okay, so if I'm going to do that particular training around a reporting tool or portfolio management or whatever it might be, you might want to put things that, you're going to show an improvement in the way things are happening within a certain time scale. If it's about learning about something new, and there are different things that you can do development wise, is it learning a new skill? Is it doing a new element to your PMO role that you've not done before? So for example, if you're wanting to do more in terms of actually running workshops, so facilitation type stuff, that would change from attendance and completion into actually devising and running and completing workshops as a facilitator, for example. This is the bit where it starts to get where you want measurement. Yeah. And being able to have target is the way that we said right at front about why we have these, is for clarity and focus. So when you start to put measure and target on there, it starts to focus the mind a lot more. And this is something by nature that the PMO should be familiar with anyway, because we're always looking for the metrics and the measures, of the services that we're offering. Are we hitting exactly what our organization and our stakeholders want? How do we measure that? So it's no different to that. It's just that you're doing it on yourself. Yeah. So you're having regular check-ins, and for some organizations, that's a regular check-in with your manager, which is even better to keeping you on track. Remember that it's development plans are for your benefit. This is for you and your professional development. So it's not about having a regular checkup and a beating with a stick because you've not done something. It is about just trying to make it easier to stay on track with some of this stuff. It's important, but sometimes it's like I said, it gets pushed to the wayside because we're all very busy. And again, having metrics that link back to the goals just make it so much easier for organizations to reinvest. So going, as you carry on working for them, but it's like, yeah, this person's on a good plan to be our next X or Y. We really want to make sure we keep investing in them. So just one here just pulled out. So a goal, for example, and just aligned very much with what key trend is right now at the moment, is that you're wanting to build some expertise in project data analytics to improve reporting and decision making. This is one that again, really prominent for now, for some people that are really wanting to get on with this. So with this one, for example, yes, you have got a course, whatever that might be, and there's a this is what it is that you're going to do, the action you're going to take, and some details about when you're going to actually do that. And then following on from that, it's like, well, okay, so after I've done that training, I want to be able to create and automate some of the dashboards, some reporting within a certain time. So, and what's the action that you're going to take around that? Going further to KPIs, it's like, will you be able to demonstrate? But actually, when I've done this, we'll be able to demonstrate that we can reduce the amount of time it takes to do something in this space. And again, so you can see, you can go to an nth degree, you can have as many actions as you want. Some people tend to have no more than 3, but just to give you an idea, get you thinking about, this is the development plan process. This is what makes it a structured plan. But for not just a box ticking exercise. this is something that it has to be deeply thought about, and something ideally with your manager if you're working within an organization. If you're a contractor or a freelancer, this is again about making sure that you keep an eye on the development side of what you're doing as well, definitely to stay relevant. But it is not a box ticking exercise if you really want to get the best out of it in terms of you progressing in your PMO career. So there's a lot of different stuff out there in terms of a development plan. Does your organization already have a template anyway for this kind of stuff? But those are some examples, and so that they come in many different shapes and sizes. But what I wanted to just kind of finish off with today is looking at our template, and also just how we utilize and think, make a good template for this kind of thing. And it doesn't need to be anything more than a template, Word or Excel. You could even just have this as a I can imagine, actually, I've just come up with an idea. If you're working as a PMO manager and you're using some of the Microsoft stuff, couldn't you use this as a Power App, for example? That would be quite a nice little project for somebody to take on to learn more about Power Apps. Anyway, so again, just a really simple table that you would be filling out and keeping an eye on as you go through the year or 2 years or whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So what I want to do is to show you, and I'm just going to stop sharing that for a second, because I'm going to show you what just as an example of one that's actually completed. Let me share that. Okay, can you see that okay? It should be on the screen now, and it's completed, and I've just increased the visibility of it so you can see it on your screen, I hope. So what I was thinking about for this one, just to give an example, this is a PMO analyst that is again just following on with our theme around the whole kind of project data analytics stuff, just because it's a thing right now. But this is a PMO analyst that's wanting to do some development with this in mind. Okay, and then within our particular template as well is getting you to think about not just current role, but also thinking more future and even further than that in terms of aspiration. But you can see there just a little thing about what the development need, business need, actions, a measure of success, when you're going to do a time frame, and then some progress notes. That doesn't need to be anything more than that. So you can see from a development need, for the goal about building expertise in project data analytics to enhance that portfolio reporting. So from a business need, what is the business need? And this is the link back to why you're doing what you're doing from an organization point of view, and putting, demonstrating that you understand that this is not a pie in the sky thing that you want to do because you're just personally interested. It's about making sure that you're clear on what that kind of business need might be. There's the actions again that we've just, we'd looked at before, but then bringing in some of those measures of success, but also then being able to plan it out in terms of when you're going to do that. So that's pretty straightforward. Have a look at a different type. So one where it's perhaps not as tool-based and perhaps not as easy as going on a training course. So this one's about improving stakeholder engagement to ensure alignment and clarity in project reporting. So again, what's the link back to the business needs? So there may be something within your organization right now, but it's just always a problem. Maybe it's something that's been identified in the lessons learned part, but you're actually wanting to pick up and do something about. That would make a great business need because it's been identified, perhaps on multiple lessons learned. So there's a nice trick about getting that through. But again, here you can see in terms of the actions about what you may do around that kind of thing, and also what would be some of the measures on something like that. So again, just thinking about, what action might you want to take out a particular business need and what the goal might be, but kind of, what do you think you could be doing in order to make that development thing? Yeah. So sometimes you can see that this is not a training course. This is about being able to do something on the job. Yeah. This is the 70% stuff. Yeah. This is about being able to, I want to be able to facilitate some sessions. So how do I go about doing that? So it is very much an on the job thing. you know, and you may do that by peer learning. You may do it by watching others, you know, go and attend quite a few and watch how others are doing it, that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's making sure that you're thinking about that 70% about what can be done on the job. And again, in current role here, let me just see if I can just bang this one onto the next page just to make it a little bit easier to read. So this one here about delivery frameworks and having agile, maybe you know, wanting to do the whole kind of go the agile mindset way, which is looking at different delivery approaches that kind of fit with that mindset. Again, not uncommon for a lot of PMO people, is about the, you know, how you then bringing that in to support hybrid, where people are using waterfall, but for some elements of the project, they may be iterating their development in part of that project. That's what we mean by hybrid. But into this one, for example, it is back to perhaps doing a training course that might be required, but also, you know, what can you do in relation to building up your kind of understanding of these agile approaches and what it is that teams are using, whether it be Scrum or whatever. And then really stretching and thinking about, well, actually, now I've done those kind of things and worked in that space for a while, perhaps you may even get seconded into a team. Maybe you just volunteer and say, I want to be in a lot more of your stand-ups to understand what's going on, whatever that might be. And then a larger part of the goal maybe is that pulling together that framework. And then finally here is also, these are three common current role things, but what about career aspiration, which might be, again, that you're thinking about maybe in 5-10 years, I'd really love to be a manager, and I'd really love to start thinking about that now. And again, you can see here in some of the examples, you know, that you could start doing something now, or actually you want to talk to your manager and have it in there as something that actually I want to start picking up in the next 12 to 24 months, whatever that might be. But, you know, you can see that, again, a lot of this stuff, it could be the 70%. You may be lucky enough to go on a leadership program, or some organizations have leaders of the future type programs. People get selected, that kind of thing. It can be as simple as doing some shadowing, some peer learning, all of that kind of thing. So again, it's not just about current role in your thinking and your reflection. It's also about being able to think a bit further down the line. So again, development, you know, it's development plans are there, you know, essentially to help you do, to give you time to focus on yourself for a change. It's about keeping it simple. And yeah, it's the only barrier to this in terms of the thinking. And there's another barriers in terms of getting a budget sign off to do some of this stuff. But I think actually for a lot of it is the barrier is probably in yourself, in about being able to have the time really to think about this, to think, you know, to think it to an nth degree where you are doing where's the link to the organization. And here's some examples that I put aside, having those conversations with your manager, all of that kind of good stuff. But we wanted to share today, you know, ultimately that, you know, development plans are there. They've been around for many, many years. A lot of successful organizations use them. It is about being able to put a structured approach to something that can sometimes feel like we don't do enough, and we just we never put pen to paper about it. It is about something which it does take time to reflect, but it helps us to have some goals that be clear. We have things like SMART and different approaches to how we might make a goal feel a little bit more concrete. We can do things that feel like more bite-sized. So we're not talking about a massive development, massive change. We can do things that are just, oh, I just need to know a little bit more about that. And it can be something as simple as, oh, I just really need to understand how to do this kind of stuff on Power BI. You know, it can be bite-sized. It is about that continuous learning. It is about growth mindset. This is what we need within the PMO. We need those kind of people, but we're always thinking about how can we do this differently? How can we do it smarter? How can we do it quicker? How can we do this with less error? You know, it's just always thinking about what we do, how can we do it better? So reflecting, evaluating, adapting in what it is that we're doing. But what I really like about this is that we take personal accountability. for who we are, what we're doing within our profession. Your organization does not own you and your PMO profession. That's you, yes. You're working with that organization and delivering and doing the role that's required of you. You've got roles and responsibilities, but you the personal accountability to make yourself attractive in the workplace, that you're, I mean, attractive in terms of great at what it is you're doing, not attractive, but it comes down to you to make sure that you are, you know adapting, that you are moving with the changes, that you are ready to take on, new and exciting things that are happening in this space. Because I've worked in this space for long enough to know there's been a couple of big times when people were really happy in their roles, and we had big economic downturns that meant that people lost their roles. And for a lot of people, it always like they've left their career management to their organizations. And if there's one thing that you can learn from old me, is that you never know what's around the corner. So you have to take that kind of personal interest, passion for what it is that you're doing. And this is just one way that we can think about doing that. So I just want to just cover off what we do have. Like I said, this is a selection of things we're going to be doing that will help people to think better about their development. PMO learning is obviously it's all about development for PMO people, and you can check out the things that we're doing in terms of that kind of formal development, that 10%. If you're interested in the training needs analysis ebook that we've already put together, that's another tried and tested management process going through training needs analysis, which is a really useful tool for PMO managers and teams and things like that. But again, as an individual, you may be wanting to have a look at that, because as you can probably imagine, how do you work out what training you need? There's a few steps that go into that, and you might be interested in that. So take a look at that as well.